1 week from tomorrow, New Yorkers will head to the polls for a crucial primary. And a new Fox News poll shows that Donald Trump has a commanding lead on the Republican side. The billionaire businessman getting 54% of support from New York Republicans, followed by John Kasich and Ted Cruz. Now this, as some big controversy is brewing over the primary process itself. Trump blasting it after Cruz swept all of Colorado's 34 pledged delegates without any votes being cast in a traditional primary or caucus. Instead, Colorado uses a complex, months-long series of state and local conventions. Watch.
We've got a corrupt system. It's not right. We're supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be, you vote and the vote means something, all right? You vote and the vote means something. And we've got to do something about it.
Well, in the meantime, his newly minted convention manager took a shot at Cruz in the fight over delegate support, comparing the Texas senator's campaign to Nazi Germany's notorious secret police.
You go to these county conventions and you see the Gestapo tactics, the scorched earth tactics.
Gestapo tactics?
They are,
that's a strong word.
Well, you look at, we're going to be filing several protests because the reality is they're not playing by the rules.
Well, the Cruz campaign dismissing those complaints as sour grapes. So who is right about this, Congressman? I mean, Trump says that we have a democracy, we actually have a republic, but does he have a point that the establishment has a corrupt process that's playing out in front of our eyes?
No, it's not corrupt unless something went on in Colorado that I don't know about. I mean, again, I'm not aware of the details on the ground, but it is a republic, and also a convention process or a nominating process, for the most part, has not been a democracy over the years. It's really only in the last 30, 40 years that primaries have played such a big role. But again, I think, and I see the role of having party leaders and others have maybe a little bit more say than is democratically required. But if they, in Colorado, if they're going to give all their votes to Cruz, that creates a backlash. This plays into Donald Trump's hands. I mean, he may have lost that anyway, but to give all the votes to Cruz, I think that gives Donald Trump a weapon to use in the other states to show how he's really getting a raw deal from the establishment.
Are you concerned about the future of the Republican Party if it's perceived that this was stolen from Donald Trump, and if his supporters believe, as he said, that this is corrupt?
I think the party is split no matter how this comes out. I mean, because Donald Trump is not going to have a supporter of more than half the party. So even if he gets the nomination, there's going to be more opposition to him probably than to any other nominee. But there's no real alternative at this stage either. And if he can show, if he can give the impression that he's being robbed, yeah, it's going to have a real impact on the party in November, yeah.
Can I get to our numbers girl, Sandra Smith, over there? Because if you look at the math, and we crunch the numbers over here, Trump leads the Republican field with 756 delegates, which is 45% roughly of all the total delegates awarded to date. But he's won about 37% of the votes. So he's actually doing pretty well.
Well, one of the first states that we heard him start to speak out and say the process isn't fair, it's not working, was Louisiana, where he won by a small margin, but then when he came out and talked about the fact that he could end up with fewer delegates than Cruz, because now you're looking at the Marco Rubio delegates, right? He's likely to receive the 5 delegates that Marco Rubio left behind, as well as the state's 5 unbound delegates. What do you say, Congressman, to the American people right now who just feel like, even though you say it's not corrupt, and it is working the way that it is supposed to be, they're so frustrated because they do worry that their voice isn't being heard and that their vote doesn't count?
Well, again, and politics is not simple. It's not easy. Democracy is not simple or easy. And you do have these checks and balances throughout the system. And again, Donald Trump, if there's any place his campaign has not worked, it's getting a ground game as far as the individual states are concerned. Bringing Manafort now is a big help. But the fact is, he was relying just on the 4 or 5 people around him, doing television, getting all the free coverage, and doing well in the primaries, and having a great media image. I give him credit for that.
And Manafort says he's going to be running a more traditional campaign, he says has to take place. I think Donald Trump supporters wonder what that looks like, because his campaign strategy has been anything but traditional.
Yeah, I'm not endorsing Trump yet. In fact, maybe I won't. But having said that, if Donald Trump is going to succeed, he's got to keep doing it the way he's done it personality-wise. He's got to tone it down a bit, maybe. But if he just starts reading speeches off a teleprompter, who needs Donald Trump? So he's sort of in that middle where he has to maintain as much of a spirit as possible, maybe tone it down a bit.
Yeah. Well, what Paul Manafort and others that he's now got out there as surrogates, and of course Paul Manafort is specifically for the convention delegates, what he will afford Donald Trump is that separation where he can continue to be who he is and then he can have these other bigger voices speak. But I guess my big question has to do with the timing of this, because we knew Donald Trump didn't necessarily have a ground game after Iowa, right? We saw in South Carolina he didn't get all the delegates he should have, yet he won some districts that he didn't expect to do well in. So that kind of didn't add up. This is the part of the ground game that I don't even think he studied. It wasn't that he didn't have it, it's that he didn't know to have it, which is different. So my question is, for you, Congressman, is there enough time left with a guy like Manafort and some of the other assets that Donald Trump is aligning now to catch up in terms of those delegates that Ted Cruz is kind of collecting in the shadows?
Well, the advantage he has is that Ted Cruz is not popular with many people. I mean, he's like the Trump alternative.
But the delegates are doing what he wants them to do?
But if Trump can get his act together, he can stop Cruz.
Is there time?
I think there is, because, again, Cruz does not have any really base of love in the Republican Party. What he would get is the people who want to stop Trump, but there's no, like, love.
Have they succeeded in taking some of the wind out of his sails?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
I mean, I guess what's interesting here is, you know, you look at the different aspects of the different races. And for the Trump campaign, it's been using the media to his advantage and getting all of that free publicity, and that's where he spent his energy. Some of the other campaigns, the defunct campaigns like Bush and Rubio, they spent a lot of money on TV, and that didn't get any traction. But we look at Ted Cruz, who has spent most of his money on infrastructure. You know, and that is a big investment. It's also a silent investment, and now he's silently working those delegates and reading the rules. You know, you talk about Trump reading speeches. Maybe he and his team should have been reading the fine print in some of these states, like Colorado and like Louisiana, because that's where Cruz is coming out on top.
Well, Congressman, and you just said, you know, a lot of people don't like Ted Cruz. So there's that argument, but then there's also the argument that people don't like Donald Trump. You hear both sides saying, well, if Donald Trump's elected, he can never win a general. But then you hear what you just said. A lot of people don't like Ted Cruz. If either of these men advances, and one of them will, what happens to their support?
I can't see, again, unless it's really close, unless Trump is really close, I can't see enough Cruz supporters that's going to Trump to put him over. I can't.
And vice versa.
Exactly, vice versa, yeah. And that's why there's really no precedent for this at all, going into a convention where no one is a popular choice and no one is beloved. Sometimes you have someone who's strong and somebody else is loved. In this case, neither one of them is loved. If anyone has an emotional supporter, it would be Trump, though. Now, he also has emotional opposition to him. Cruz is not, again, this is my own bias. I'm not a Ted Cruz fan. But having said that, Cruz politically does not have any loyal, loving base he can fall back on.
Will you endorse Donald Trump?
No, I don't intend to support anybody before the convention right now.
Oh, okay.
Do you think it's going to be a contested convention?
I think it could well be. I mean, I can go into a lot of reasons why. I think Donald Trump has made some serious misstatements as far as I'm concerned. Ted Cruz, I just don't like working with him in Washington. Kasich it's probably the most popular, but I don't think people think he's viable right now.
Why don't you like working with Ted Cruz in Washington?
Well, going back to the government shutdown, going back to the fact that he's constantly questioning people's motives. The government shutdown, and again, we can all disagree on that, some of us can. I thought that was inane. He knew from the start it wasn't going to work. He told the House Republicans, not me, I never believed him, that you just block it in the House, get it to me in the Senate, I'll be able to stop Obamacare. It goes to the Senate, and he reads Dr. Seuss on the Senate floor.
So why do you think he did it?
I think he's playing on, in some ways, what Donald Trump is doing. He knows the American people are not happy with Congress, not happy with Washington, and he was going to be the white knight, the Lone Ranger, whatever you want to call him, standing up to all the corruption in Washington, the only honest man.
Yeah, those are two different subjects, the Lone Ranger and the White Knight.
Yeah.
It's two different images. You know, it's interesting because you had said, I don't know if I'm going to do Donald Trump, don't know, but now it looks like you won't endorse anybody before the convention. So my question for you is, are we looking at the man you think who will be the nominee among these three, or do you think that there's still room for somebody to come in at that convention?
There could be room, but it's hard for someone to come in. Like, there's no war hero out there. There's no, again, Shining Knight, to use another example. There's no one out there who's going to, so I don't know who will come up. You know, people mention Paul Ryan. He's probably the only possibility I can see.
He's got a whole Facebook campaign now. You know, you've probably seen that, his new leadership on Facebook this morning.
I get it every day,
But if that happened, but Kennedy, if that would happen, if they would push somebody else, then you're going to have disaffected Cruz and Trump supporters, which means what? President Clinton?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but also, you know, look at the voters who are not invested in the Republican Party. Look at the people who are really on the outside now, just starting to pay attention, and they look and they're like, this guy wasn't even running for president. You know, why should I vote for someone like that?
Or speaker.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and what's he going to be next? Is he going to be drafted to Miss Universe?
By the way, I can't help but ask while you're sitting on the sofa with 4 women, the gender gap that is still identified, the problem with women in the Republican Party. Is it getting any better? I mean, you still look at the stats here today, the gender gap in Trump support. He's the favorite among 59% of men, 49% of women.
Yeah, Donald Trump in some cases his own worst enemy. He's said things that are not politically correct when it comes to women. And again, we do have a gender gap, and a lot of that's done by the media. A lot of it's done by our own maybe incapacity to know when to say the right thing. I think women love me, but I can't. I'm trying to tell you.
I know 4 that do.
There you go. I'll quit now.
Good stuff, congressman.
Exactly.
Thank you. Man. Okay.